I was afraid of what people would think if I failed. And so that was what I started to address. So address the root, and then that will also help with what's coming out.
Hey guys, I'm Mindi Linscombe, your host of the Something New Show, and I am welcoming you here to help us learn how to live a life worth celebrating. Is something we like to talk about every episode. And in this week's episode, we have a really special guest who is from Colorado Springs, but traveled home for this episode and a few other things in town today. So I want you to welcome with me Aaron Stern. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thanks so much, Mindy. It is so great to be with you.
Yeah, and we met in, I want to say 2003, so it's been a minute, 21 years. But I want to tell people a little bit about you quickly before we jump into all the amazing topics we have. So Aaron has been married to Jessie for 29 years, who's also a dear friend. They have 4 boys that are all ranging between teenage and adulthood.
Yeah, 15 to 22.
And 21. And they're already almost getting married. I can't believe that. He's been a pastor for 25 years. Currently, he's living in Fort Collins. He has planted one of the largest churches up there called Mill City Church. And he is the author of What's Your Secret? So I'd love to start with that book title because I think that is pretty jarring to just think about. The book with a title that says, What's Your Secret? I'm curious to what even began in your mind when you said, hey, I got to write a message. There's something going on in people's hearts and lives. So where did that title come from? What stirred in your heart when you said, I got to write this book? Because this wasn't just like this year. This was...
Yeah, correct. I wrote it, and it came out in 2011.
Okay.
So it's been a little while.
Yeah.
But I was a college pastor, and at a church where the lead pastor had a moral failure. And I would meet with college students, 20-somethings, over coffee over the upcoming months after all those that blew up. And at first, usually the first question was, what happened? How could that happen? But quickly the conversations turned towards, how is that not going to happen to me? From 19, 20, 21, 22-year-olds, why is that not going to happen to me? Which I think is such a great question.
Yeah, because if you think about it, the person you're describing was on the outside appearing very successful, had things together, great people in their life. You would think that there's no way it could fall apart.
Yeah, and why am I going to be the exception to the rule?
Mm-hmm.
So out of that came talking about it on a platform and talking about it in our college ministry, and then turned it into a book because it hit a nerve. It hit a nerve amongst young people, hit a nerve amongst older people, and essentially it is the fact that we need to live in the light. Shame grows in the dark, and so we don't want to be people that allow little things to become big things. Nobody wakes up one day and decides, you know what, I'm going to destroy my marriage today. Mm-hmm. Everything's going so great. How boring is this? So I'm going to go have an affair, or I'm going to cheat, or do this, or do something that's going to blow my life up. Nobody does that. And it is the small things, and it is regularly the unconfessed things that need to come out of the darkness into the light. And they need to be shared with the right people. It's not Facebook. It's not the right place.
Yeah.
But we do need to have trusted people, people that we can, I like to say it this way, actually. We have a public self. We have, what people know. It's
the Instagram version.
Yeah, exactly. And it actually can be an aspect of ourselves that's not even actually true. We can create an image of ourselves that may be accurate or may not. Mm-hmm. And it is what you know and what I know. I know you have blonde hair. I'm wearing clear framed glasses. I know that, you know that, it's obvious. But there's more, and sometimes we can spend all of our energy managing our public self. Just how am I perceived? What do other people think of me? All that.
Yeah. And
there's an element of that that's important. We don't not care, but it's not the only thing. So, but then there's other aspects of who we are. There's the hidden self. That would be the part that I know but you don't. I would have to tell you. I'd have to tell you my fears. I'd have to tell you my temptations. I'd have to tell you the things about me that are not obvious and they're not public. And we need people in our lives where we can take our mask off, where we can share our secrets. It's in Alcoholics Anonymous that says you're only as sick as your secrets. And so our secrets can destroy us, and eventually they can or they will. And so we need to be able to have trusted people in our lives that we're able to share. And I like to think of it this way too, that we don't just share the negative or hard or difficult or painful or failing parts of our lives, but we actually also can share our dreams and our hopes and the things that you may not know about somebody, but they have to tell you. And those are vulnerable too.
Absolutely.
And then the last one, actually there's four. The other one would be what you know, but I don't know. And I need somebody who's going to tell me the things about my life. Like I can't see my blind spots. They're blind spots for a reason. So I need trusted friends that are able to see who I am and say, hey, it's kind of the lettuce in the teeth moment. You know, like, hey, you got something. Yeah, like you're like, it's so embarrassing. But thank God for that person. And that's trivial, but what about the things that are like more serious? Or, again, also on the positive flip side is the things that we don't see in ourselves are the gold that somebody else can draw out.
That's my favorite.
Yeah, when you see something in somebody and you give them an opportunity, or hey, have you ever noticed this about you? And we need people like that can draw out highlight the things that need to be highlighted that we might not see, and highlight the things that we might not see as well. And the last one is what I don't know and you don't know, which I think is your potential self. And the only way we reach our potential self is if we address our public self, our hidden self, and our blind self.
Okay, I have so many thoughts. I think about how I feel like the person that's most helpful in that area for me is my spouse. But then I'm also like, not everyone has a spouse like that. I'm really feeling grateful right now that I have someone trustworthy.
Totally. You know? Hopefully that is a person that we can share with. But I would like to suggest that the group should be larger than that. Doesn't have to be huge, but there should be not anything in our lives that nobody knows.
Right.
Not to say that everybody needs to know everything, but and Jessie, my spouse, there's nothing about me that she doesn't know. But there's other people in my life that help me in different ways and help her in different ways as well.
Yeah.
And I think we need a constellation of mentors. We need a constellation of friends. I don't need just peers who maybe are struggling with the same thing and can be empathetic. I also want people who are further along or battled it and won. And so I think we should have like, who could I call? And I found that as I wrote the book and would talk about it with people is not only did they find like, I have a secret to share. I have something I need to
reveal. Like I need somebody to know.
That sometimes what they found themselves was, I don't know who I would share it with. And so it was a catalyst for developing community.
Yeah, I really could see that because as you were talking and I was having my grateful moment, I was also thinking about how I do have people that are mentors, but some of them are mentors in a way that's like a business mentor. They've been there, battled, won in business, and then I have people that have done that in family that I really look up to them with how they've run their family and just developed, they're in their late 70s, they have kids and grandkids, and I'm like, okay, how do I get to that, Yep. And I see that as they've won that battle, and it was as simple as telling them how much I admired the fruit in their life and would it be possible if we could be friends. And it was so simple, and most people, if you're not weird about it, are very flattered by that.
Yeah.
And I've just said, I'm not going to overwhelm you or be extra and text all the time. I have to think about the term Allie told me yesterday, needs extra grace or something like that.
Oh,
she's like,
EGR.
EGR.
Extra grace required.
Yes, extra grace required. She was like, oh, that person's definitely EGR. And I was like, EGR? What is that? And then I had to laugh. And I said to this person that has really been amazing in family, I said, I'm not going to be, a burden to you. I just am wondering if once in a while I could call. Is that possible? And they were very open to that.
When I was a college pastor at one point, and I would regularly have college students or 20-somethings asking me, how do I find a mentor? And one of them actually went to somebody and said, will you be my mentor? And they said no. And which I found so funny. But I actually understood it, because the idea of a mentor to them was like, I got to have all the answers, and we're going to call and talk all the time.
And it sounded like a big commitment.
It was a big commitment and big pressure. And I said, oh, you're asking the wrong question. Don't ask them to be your mentor. Tell them there's something about your life that you appreciate, or that you would like to emulate, you want to learn from. Like, hey, the way that your marriage, or the way that you raise kids, or how you seem to manage finances, or how you lead your business, or whatever, I would love to pick your brain. Can I buy you lunch or buy you coffee? Mm-hmm. Come with more questions you have time for. And no, there's not one person that doesn't want to share about their lives. Mm-hmm. And so I said, if it turns into more than one coffee, great. If it doesn't, great. But just approach it that way. I promise you'll never get a no.
Yeah. It's much lighter.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's so good. And then just also going through my head as you spoke was, okay, so I have the mentors. I'm so thankful for my spouse. But then also the friendship category is really interesting as you go into adulthood, because, when you're younger, I feel like there's a lot of social opportunities for natural community to develop.
Yep.
But as you get older, it's harder, as career has more demands. Let's say you rise in leadership. You have even more demands with leadership, which we should talk about leadership here in a second. But then you have kids. And so when you're not at work, my free time is spent with my children. And so adult friendship gets challenging. However, you need those peers. And to your point, there's been a few times in life that I felt really lonely. Like, who could I tell that I just met a goal that I'd been working on for 5 years? Mm-hmm. But to tell someone that I have this goal was already going to blow people out of the water. They'd be like, no, that's uncomfortable for me, for you to tell me your dream. Mm-hmm. And then second of all, to tell you that it happened is even harder.
Yeah.
And I mean, I have faults too that I need to share, and I do have peers that I share that with. But I think as I've aged, that pocket of people has been harder to find.
100%. I think there's two variables to that. The first one, I like to say that, when we grow up, most of our lives, we have relationships of convenience. You
are in the same school.
Exactly. Same
Whatever.
School, in the same, and it usually ends or becomes difficult right after college. Because you just are around them, you're in the same dorm room, you're in the same, you have roommates.
Life is you're coexisting.
And if we don't make the switch around that time, we will maybe find ourselves very lonely or with friends we don't like. Because you might end up in a workplace where the people around you don't hold the same values, or you just don't enjoy the same things. Mm-hmm. Whereas usually everything else, you have some sort of common interest, whether it's a major or a club or something, and you're just naturally around each other. So at some point you need to make the switch, or understand that it has to be relationships of intentionality, where you're like, I am going to do what I didn't have to do, and I'm going to go, and maybe it's to church, or maybe it's to, or it's just somebody you notice at work, but you're not around that often. I'm going to go spend time with them. How can we go out? How can we hang out? How can we spend some time? And cultivate the relationships that you want. And you just mentioned like rising in leadership and all that. And that's the other dynamic I think that sometimes contributes to loneliness. I was an associate pastor at a church for a long time. That was when I was a college pastor. And there were several other associates, like same level. And we became really great friends. We had a lot in common. We spent a lot of time together, all that kind of thing. Well, when we planted our church 12 years ago, I'm the only lead pastor. There's no other lead pastors around for me to be able that can know or understand the weight of being the boss. So now the other, like the associate pastors on our staff, it's different because there's a power dynamic and they can't understand the weight I carry.
And it's like just the same. I totally see that. I was going to say it's just the same for an entrepreneur. Like you are running in an industry. Let's say you're an excellent professional, and then you decide, I think I can do it better. So I'm going to go start my own business. And you now have people under you, but now you're at the top, and that power dynamic makes it so that you can't necessarily be peers.
Exactly. And I can be friends with the people I work with, and we can have a great time. But I can't share everything. I can't share the staffing problems.
Well, you don't want to overburden them.
Totally.
Yeah.
Not only, and there's also an element they just can't understand. Can't understand the weight. I remember when I was an associate and I thought about my boss and like, why isn't he doing this or what? And then I became the boss and I'm like, oh, I get it. So it took more work now for me to find friends, and I had to find other lead pastors. You know, you have to find another entrepreneur. You have to find another business owner that can relate on a different level. Otherwise, I think it's easy to find yourself lonely.
And I think, let's just say, for the sake of 2024 and how everybody lives wherever, works wherever, a lot of your people might not even be local.
Totally. I have some of my closest friends don't live in Fort Collins.
So what do you do to nurture those relationships?
Yeah, I have a couple of other lead pastors that we actually meet on Zoom every month for 90 minutes, and we get together once a year, like fly somewhere and spend a few days together.
It's just like a priority.
Yeah, so it's time, it's money, it is a priority, and they are amazing friends. And because we're in the same line of work, not only do we share our struggles, but we help one another. Hey, what do you guys do with this? How do you handle this budget item? Or how do you handle this staff issue? Or what are you saying or thinking about this cultural issue or something like that? So helpful. And 90 minutes is great, and we've done it for 7 years. And we have cultivated an amazing friendship, but there's something then about like a couple of days together.
Extra in person is so
Absolutely.
Powerful. So you do have to decide, okay, is this that valuable enough to me to make time for it, carve some days out in my calendar, and invest financially in those possibilities of hanging out,
And I can't imagine my life without them.
Yeah. I love it. Okay, so let's talk about the inner workings of a leader. You said that's something you love to talk about.
Yeah.
When you think about the struggles that leaders face, what are some things that really come to mind? And what are some things that you've really done to say, hey, I'm going to stay healthy? Because we were just talking about how my coaching calls today, all of them were about burnout. Every single leader was talking to me about that. And how do I, operate my schedule, my responsibilities? And I think the easy way is just to back out and say, I'm done. I'm just going to sell my business. I'm going to retire early, whatever it might be, because it's just so hard. And I would challenge them to say, hey, let's reconsider. Do you need a break? And then can we change your schedule so that there's a better rhythm and cadence to the job at hand? But what are the things you see, and how would you describe leadership right now?
I mean, I think friendship and loneliness. Loneliness is a massive epidemic in our country.
Yeah.
And so we've talked about that for sure. So you need the right people around you. Otherwise, I think the loneliness contributed along with the difficulty is a cocktail for disaster. But I think in terms of pace, you just mentioned like rhythms and all that kind of stuff is huge. So we live in a world that says the faster the better. And I think one of the things that I've learned over time is it's not always faster the better. And it's also like, what's the best thing for me to be doing? I was reading Parker Palmer is an author of a book. The book's name is Let Your Life Speak. I think that's the right title. Anyway, he talks about burnout, and he says burnout and exhaustion, sometimes we think it's because we're doing too much, which is true. That is a possibility. And so we need to evaluate, am I doing the right things? Is there things I need to delegate? Is there things that I don't need to care as much about or whatever? I've gone through lots of those things. But the other thing is he says that we get exhausted when we give something that we don't possess. So we're drawing out of a dry well. And so there are some things that I'm gifted at, and there's other things that I'm not gifted at. And there's some things that as a leader, other people are gifted at, things that you're gifted at, that if somebody tries to be you and do exactly what you do, they may burn out because they're trying to be something they're not. Whereas it doesn't mean that doesn't matter. It just means that they maybe need to figure out who else can do it besides them. And so there's a way that we need to figure out what are my limits? I think not only in terms of time, but also like
Giftings.
and calling and talents and skills and all of that, you know. Some people are really administrative. And so like, but somebody who's not, like, tries to be really administrative, they're going to be exhausted. So how do you make sure that the administration gets taken care of, but you're not trying to be something you're not? So I think that takes like self-awareness. That takes humility to say, I'm just not very good at that. Or I don't want to do that. You know? The other thing I think is coming to a place where you can realize what you're supposed to be doing. This COVID was terrible. I don't know anybody that liked it or had a great time, you know. As a leader, it was without a doubt one of the hardest leadership seasons I've ever had.
That was the first time I've ever done layoffs.
Oof.
First time.
Yeah.
But when you go 30 days in and there's no end in sight and no revenue,
yeah,
you have to say, okay, like what's the the way Jordan described it when we did this big meeting, he said either we all stay on the boat and we all sink, or we get everyone off except for just 3-4 people.
Yeah.
We keep this thing humming so that the goal is in the end of this journey, however long this takes, and it was 3 months before we were open again. That's a lot of revenue missed, right?
Yeah.
And we said, and then when we open again, we can start to welcome people back, but we can't carry. This is before any sort of promise of PPP money or ERC or anything like that, right? So you just don't know. And if we all stay on the boat, we're going to all sink.
Yep.
So that was a really tricky time. We had just built this building. You just got a building.
Yep.
It's just a crazy endeavor. So you're saying COVID, keep going.
Yeah, so everything you just described was, and we were in a position where it felt like, say one thing, you're...
Oh, I'm sure.
It's a lose-lose.
Yes.
It took me a little while to realize there's nothing I can say, there's no decision I can make that everybody's going to be happy. Mm-hmm. So I just have to make the best decision I know how to make and just go for it. And
stand strong with it.
That's right, absorb the punches. And so as hard as it was, actually COVID was a gift. Well, a gift came out of it in the sense that it taught me something about my leadership. And it helped me become healthier on the inside. It helped me to differentiate as a leader. I found, and I could imagine this being true for a pastor of a church, this can be true for a business owner, somebody's, that essentially your well-being is related to the success of your business. Mm-hmm. Like, if things are good, I'm up. If things are not good or hard or going down, then I'm not good. Now, of course, they affect us, but we were losing people, we were losing money, church was struggling.
Well, you couldn't be open.
Yeah, and we were renting at the time, and we were online for 50 weeks. So we didn't know. Well, it was so hard. So we met in other ways, but it was not normal, and we experienced financial difficulties, all that. Well, I realized I was several months in and realizing I'm not well. And it isn't just because things were down. Like, I had people that were sharing their feelings that weren't always positive. And I realized I am more too attached to my church. Like, it's good to be affected by it, but I don't want my well-being to be determined by how well it's going. Instead, I like, my favorite animal is a rhino. I want to have thick skin and a tender heart. I don't want to get so detached and cold that it's like, oh, it doesn't matter. Here we go, and you just bulldoze through. I want to keep a tender heart, but I also needed some thicker skin in the right way. And so I realized I was overly attached and I needed to differentiate. And as a result of working through some of those dynamics, I have come to a place where, one, I enjoy my job more than I ever have. And I think it's because I'm not ruled by other people's opinions. I'm not ruled by the ways that other people see me. I mean, sometimes it's like I get a negative email or something, and it's like, that's okay. I'm not trying to create issues, or if there's something that we did wrong or need to make right, we'll try and make it right. But sometimes it's just an opinion, and I'm like, that's okay. And moving on.
Yeah, but taking the feedback with gratitude. Hey, thanks for the feedback. I'll work on that.
Yeah, but I am not my church. You are not your business.
Mm-hmm. And isn't that such a good reminder for any high-performing person, whether they are, in a career that they're not the entrepreneur, but let's just say a career, or even, I can even think of a stay-at-home mom that's like associating her child's behavior as an identifier for 100%. Their success. It doesn't matter who you are, but I'm like, your productivity and outcome a lot of times determines your mood on how you're doing. Like, oh, we had a great sales month, so you're feeling great. But then when you don't, then you don't feel great. But when you go to the real heart of the matter, where does your value come from? And I mean, and you and I both share the same philosophy that, we're created in the image of God. That's why we're valuable. It's not because of the things we produce. Those are things that are fun to celebrate. And trust me, we're both very, high achieving. Let's go. Let's reach these goals. But I'm thinking, just even in the entrepreneurs I get to coach and listen to and support, I know that it's very attached to your emotional state based on the outcomes of your surroundings.
Yeah. And I think that we can evaluate our level of health based upon our reactivity to things. So how reactive or defensive are you to a negative comment, negative review? How reactive are you to negative information about your kid? How reactive are you to some sort of pushback or feedback? I mean, it could be from a boss, it could be from a peer, it could be from your spouse.
I love that way to measure it. I love that so much. I'm like thinking about it because sometimes one of the things Bear says about me is like, Mom, I love that you never feel shocked about anything. And I guess I've just kind of been to hell and back. And so have you when it comes to family trials and tribulations. And so it's kind of like, okay, did anybody die? Okay. If nobody died or is dying that we need to save in crisis right now, then let's just like take a minute and let's walk through it. Like, let's work our way backwards. One of the things I told one lady today, and she's a dear friend, is she's living very much in the what if situations and concerned based on some, historical data on her company or whatever. And I said, okay, that's a reality, but let's put a plan together on how to change it. But you're wasting a lot of your energy with every statement that starts with what if. So whenever you have the statement start with what if, I want you to stop right there, because all your energy is going to that possibility.
Totally.
And I reminded her what Jordan always says. He's like, stop thinking about all the things that could go wrong and start thinking about all the things that could go right.
That Jordan.
I know. He's a good one. It's so true, though. And I have 5 things I could tell you, even personally, that, with business, with opportunities that could be what if situations. But I don't let myself go there because I think it's wasted energy. And I encourage her to think of how can you not think about those things until they happen.
Right.
And then when they happen, we'll deal with it.
Yep.
If that happens, we'll deal with it. And I said what's cool is you can start to plan with foresight. Like maybe we could even avoid them happening with a little bit of a plan.
Yeah.
And then take some of that pressure off. Because right now you're going to bed every night just worrying. And, worrying just steals all of our energy.
Yeah, because I think the goal is, we can't necessarily control the things that come up. The what ifs might drop into your head. And what you're saying is how much time and energy you're going to give them. But I think it's really important also that we ask, like, why are they coming up? Like, what's underneath that what if? Like, what am I really afraid of? When we planted our church a little over 12 years ago, I experienced anxiety for a year. And I had never experienced anxiety prior to that. I mean, I couldn't sleep. I would go to bed. I'd fall asleep just fine, but I'd wake up 3, 4 o'clock in the morning every night. And so I almost dreaded going to sleep. And in 1 year, I can count on one hand the number of like good nights of sleep that I had.
Wow.
And so, I wasn't trying to do that.
Right. It's your subconscious, right?
Yeah. I wasn't thinking, now there was some what ifs. What if it doesn't succeed?
What if I can't feed my kids?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
Those are real things.
But actually, I was not afraid of not feeding my kids.
You knew it would be fine.
It had everything to do with my reputation. I was like, what are people going to think of me if I fail? So that was helpful for me, not just to say I'm anxious and I don't want to be, so I'm going to stop. Of course, I wanted to stop, but I couldn't. It just was. I would wake up in the middle of the night and my heart would be racing. And so what I started to do was address, okay, why am I nervous? Why am I anxious? And it wasn't that I had full confidence. I could find another job. Food on the table was not going to be a problem. I was afraid of what people would think if I failed. And so that was what I started to address. So address the root, and then that will also help with what's coming out.
This episode is sponsored by Something Blue 30A. Looking for the perfect vacation spot to disconnect from everything, put your feet in the softest sand, and enjoy a fresh, renovated 2-bedroom, 2.5-bath townhouse right on the beach in my favorite place in the world? Well, 30A is situated in the Panhandle of Florida, and I'd love for you to check out Something Blue 30A on Instagram and make it the perfect place for your next vacation. That's so good. I was just thinking about how maybe Jessie, in 29 years of marriage, how she walked that out with you.
Oh, she is a rock. And thankfully, I don't know if you and Jordan have experienced this, but if I've ever been in a place struggling, she's usually like steady, stable, great. She was like that during COVID, and I was really having a hard time. Planting our church was a rough anxiety season. She's like cool as a cucumber and kind of reminding me like, Aaron, this is going great. It's no problem. I think we're out just fine. And very specific, but she wasn't like just trying to pep me up. She was steady. And then when I'm fine, she usually will not be as fine, So I thank God for the balance and the ways that works out. But yeah, she is a gift. Has been a gift through all of that.
What are, I've heard a lot of couples advice, on marriage and things. And one of the funniest ones is just always have a date night, And for Jordan and I, that just wasn't possible. I'm just being honest. It's not something we chose to do. Not saying that it's wrong. I'm just going to explain. It's because when you both are entrepreneurial parents, full-time career, and you've been away from your kids, you don't want to leave again at night for a date night. I'm just being very honest with you. It's like I've been away from my kids. I don't want to keep being away from them. So we found creative ways to spend time together. Sometimes it was a breakfast early in the morning before the kids were awake, have coffee at the kitchen table, talk, whatever. But I would love for you to tell me, not in because I'm basically saying I hate the date night suggestion because it doesn't work for everybody. But what are some things that like you guys did to stay connected through major, you've had some really sad things happen too, just in different family experiences. And I'm just wondering, what did you guys do to not drift apart?
Yeah. Well, if it makes you feel any better, we've never had a consistent date night either.
Cheers.
Cheers. And for lots of the same reasons. I mean, either tired or kids or whatever. It's so hard to have a date night and so expensive if you're going to get a babysitter.
Yes.
I mean, my goodness.
Yes.
The babysitter can cost more than the date itself.
Than the date.
So once our kids were going to school, we had dates, go out for lunch. Fridays now we have a standing Friday lunch date, sushi. So you adjust with the season of life. But I do think whether it's early in the morning, and now we do a lot of just, all our kids would do in the house still, and it's just quieter in the mornings and all that. So a lot of our connection time happens in the morning. But I think the key is not the date itself. The key is the heart connection. So you can go out and see a movie, you can go to dinner and never connect. Or you can sit in your house and and have a coffee or something and really connect, you know? So to me, that's the key, is like, when are you sharing and how are you doing? What's really going on? A question we like to ask is, what's on your heart and how do you feel about it? And as a way to just like draw out the deeper things rather than just coordinating schedules and who's picking up who.
I know, George's always like,
tomorrow night.
we are not talking schedule when we spend that time together. It's like a firm rule he has, because it's so easy to just hop over. Oh, we need you to pick up Bear at whatever time, you know? And he's like, no. But I like those questions. Say that again.
What's on your heart and how do you feel about it?
And it could be about anything.
Yeah. So I have this, and you know, it's beyond, it might be circumstantial, like what's on your mind or your heart, but how you feel about it gets deeper.
Do you ask similar questions to your boys?
Yeah. I mean, sometimes we'll do that around the table, highs and lows, for sure. We like to, I always think that, have you ever read the book, The Art of Gathering? Mm-mm. You should read it. Talks about the intention. You can have a gathering and it can be fine, or you can have a gathering with intentionality. And so many of them are related to the topics and the questions and how they're engaged. So whether it's with our staff or it's around a dinner table or Jessie and I sitting around for sushi lunch, I mean, we'll try. I have a running list of questions in
Me too.
in my phone.
I went on a cruise with some friends, both of our families, and every night I had already pre-planned every night what questions we were going to talk about. But it was so good.
Oh, I've taken them and like stuffed them in a hat, and somebody pull a question. I
love it.
You know, and see what comes up. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So intentional. Okay, so with the boys, I have a lot of boys just like you, and I think some boys are really quick and open-hearted and want to share, but some are not.
So true.
What do you do with the ones that are not?
I mean, I think in general, the same idea about heart connection applies with your kids that it does to your spouse. So, you know, we can drive our kids to get good grades and lose their heart, and I don't think that's a great trade-off. Mm-mm. So I think part of it is like understanding how unique each kid is, and some kids can handle some pressure. Like, it's good for them. Some of my boys don't do well with pressure. And
like, the more pressure you put on them, the worse it crumbles them.
The more distant they're going to get from you. Like, you can lose your heart and it's all because you want them to get good grades, or you want them to do their best, or practice more, or whatever. And for some, they will respond to it. Like, that's their personality, whatever. Then for others, they just won't, it will crush them. And for lots of different reasons. So how do you stay close to their heart? And I think, I don't know, for me as a parent, I think I can kind of feel it. Like, okay, I need to spend some time with Smith or Brooks. Parker, Cone, Brooks, and Smith are the boys' names. So I'll go out for ice cream, or we'll just, hey, how's it going?
Climb a 14er.
Totally.
How many of those have you climbed again?
34.
No big deal. 34 out of 58 in Colorado.
24 to go.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. The other thing I do is right around kind of 12, 13, teenager, breaking into puberty type of phase, is I give them a journal. And I say, hey, if there's anything ever that you want to talk about, but I know, like, I was that age. It's like awkward to bring things up where you're just not as like relationally or conversationally skilled. So I'm like, if you feel like you want to tell me something, but you don't know how to bring it up, write it in your journal, like this little journal. It's kind of mine and yours, and leave it at my bedside, and let that like break the ice.
Have they done it?
Yeah. And usually I'll go back to them in person rather than just like writing back and forth. But it breaks the ice, you know, something
easier.
Something they need to share is some sort of secret, or something that's
You're like, hey, I wrote a book about this.
Yeah.
I can help you. No, I'm joking.
Here you go. And then usually what I'll do after we kind of talk through it or whatever, and then I'll write something in the journal back to them about the conversation and encouraging them to share more in the future. And so some of my boys have used it and others haven't. But it's another way for us to just keep the communication open and continue to talk with them and all that.
I have 2 more questions about parenting boys.
Okay.
One is sometimes there's a set that does not get along. And I'm not saying that's for sure, but I think in both of our family dynamics, we could say that we have a set. Mm-hmm. But what I think you're farther along, and what I think I've heard is that set for you maybe started out very just a lot of friction, but now has actually turned into a really incredibly close friendship. Yeah. And they were very different, but still now it's like today, if you're to say like, hey, how things are going, it's like you've crossed over. Mm-hmm. And I'm just wondering, first of all, I'm hoping for some, light at the end of the tunnel. But also I'm wondering, do you feel like it was like a moment in time that converted that? Or was it just like a slow progression of maturing and realizing, okay, my brother is actually a pretty awesome dude?
Yeah. I don't think it was a moment. I think there's a dynamic in the teenage years for boys. I think for our boys, it's been anywhere from like 2 to 4 years. In the like 11, 12 is when it starts, it's puberty, but they're just irritable. Yeah. I mean, and for a couple of our boys, it was 2 years, and it seems like they turned into it quickly, and then it feels like it's going to go forever. And then they turn out of it quickly. And during those times, they're just irritable. They're men trying to break out of a little boy's body. And they don't know how to do it. And so there's usually more tension with mom and dad. They lose their cuddliness, which is so sad sometimes.
I know. Yes, I know.
But I think like sometimes those have been the times when they've been the most at odds with one another. And so I think there's a little bit of like, let's just normalize this. Now we're not saying it's okay, but just they're raging at each other 1 minute, and then 20 minutes later, they're fine. Okay, now let's talk. So I think we've gotten better at teaching how to resolve. Conflict is normal. Conflict is normal for anybody. The problem's not conflict. The problem is if we don't learn how to resolve conflict. So that's what we try and teach our boys. And in the middle of the heat of the moment is the worst time to get them to do it. But if we can work through, otherwise they build resentment up towards one another, and that resentment turns into contempt, and that's hard to undo.
Yes.
So it's regular, ongoing, how do we resolve this? How do we talk through this? How do you name it? And we try to get them to be as specific as possible. Not just I'm sorry, but I'm sorry for.
Yeah.
And name it specifically.
And sometimes I don't think they're aware that whatever they just did was like so hurtful to the other person.
Yeah.
Until that other person says, no, that like really bothered me that you did such and such.
Yeah. Which too often we spend our time defending our intentions and not owning our impact. So, well, I didn't mean to do that. That's not what I meant. Mm-hmm. Well, that's fine, and that's okay to like communicate and clarify. But we also need to realize that even if we don't mean to say something hurtful, that if it hurts somebody, and I think that the higher up in leadership you go, like my words carry weight, and they have impact on people. As a boss, your words have
much more weight.
More weight. So you have to be even more aware and own your impact because of the weight they carry. And so had a conversation with one of my boys not too long ago about, he's like, that's so dumb. And I was like, yeah, but you got to realize that what you did had an impact that I know you didn't mean, but this was the impact it had. And so you need to realize that, own that, and learn from it so that you don't do that again.
So good. Okay, last question, and then we can wrap it up. But before I ask this last question, that's pretty interesting. Where can people find you if they want to stay in touch with you, Aaron?
Instagram.
And what's your Instagram handle?
Aaron Stern. AARON STERN.
Okay. I think it's pretty cool. And you, I'm sure, talk about all sorts of things on there, right?
Yeah. Family stuff, church stuff. Yeah.
Love it. And they can even probably listen to you on a regular, right? Online.
Yeah, you can listen online. Our church website is millcitychurch.org. And yeah, there's all the messages and all that kind of stuff are on there.
Awesome. Okay. Let's say, and maybe this hasn't happened, and if it hasn't, that's really great. But let's just say there's a person that your child has an attraction to or is interested in that you know is not a good, healthy person for them to be around. And you don't want to push them away.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a couple of things that come to my mind. Mm-hmm. The first one is I always think that it's valuable to teach your kid, deposit seeds before it matters. So I start talking to my boys about dating when they're 12. They think girls are gross and have cooties, you know? So we start talking about dating and like what it's for and when. And we don't have a line. It's not like, oh, when you're 16 or when you're 18. It's based on maturity determined by Jessie and I and with them. That's the line. So, and we talk about the power of friendship, you know? My youth pastor used to say, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. And it's so true. So talk a lot about who they're around and the influence and the ways that it shapes them, all that kind of thing. So then I can draw on the conversations we've had. Hey, you remember when we talked about this? I wonder if this is the case. So draw on that, draw on dating. Hey, let's talk about what this looks like. And then the other part that I think is so important as we talk about relationships and friendships and all that kind of thing is in relationships and dating specifically, I say there's just different seasons. You know, you could be 16 and she could be a great girl. But you know what? This is not the time that you're going to like find somebody to marry right now. Like maybe she will be, but actually the best use of your energy right now is to develop friendship. So intimacy is cultivated with vulnerability and exclusivity and time. And if you're only talking to her and revealing intimate details about your life and vice versa, you're cultivating intimacy. But this is a time for breadth of friendship, not depth of friendship, or depth of, especially with the opposite sex. So those types of things have helped the conversation as we keep the conversation going. And this is the other thing, Mindy, is that when they're teenagers, I always think that as a parent, there's phases of life that we have to pay attention to. And I find that there are some parents who are trying to parent their teenagers like they're 6. You just don't have the same control. Mm-hmm. And no matter how much you want it, you just don't. Mm-hmm. So you can't have the same authoritarian type of parenting style that you had and maybe was appropriate when you're 5. I mean, you tell them where to go and when to sleep and what to eat. I mean, it's just how life works and you keep them alive. But when they're 15, it's not the same as when they're 5. And so they become a player in the game. So they kind of become you're a player coach. And so how do you come alongside them in the way that I think about teenage years? And this is part of the not pushing them away too much, is they have no choice when they're 5. Like I am their parent and I will always be my boy's dad. But it isn't too long into, especially when they graduate and move out of the house and all that kind of stuff, our relationship becomes voluntary. Like, I'm always their dad, but you see I know plenty of parents whose kids they don't even talk to their kids, you know? So what does that look like, and how do you voluntarily cultivate a relationship? How do you cultivate a relationship that enables them or gives them a desire to want to be with you, you know? And so instead of telling them what to do, how do you bring them into the conversation? Say, okay, let's talk about this. What do you think about this? And how's this going? And as opposed to I don't like her. She's out. and statistically, actually, parents who resist the girl person, or boy that they're wanting to date, if the parents resist them hard, statistically they stay in that relationship longer. And I don't know if that's
and possibly have less of an adult relationship with you.
totally. Yeah.
I've seen that.
And it is a tricky dance. Mm-hmm. It's tricky. Mm-hmm. Yep.
We are not, thankfully, in that position, and it's possible we could be, right? Because our kids haven't started dating. I'm just saying we haven't been there yet. I think our focus has been just we're all in being relationally connected to our kids.
Yep.
I have not been necessarily thinking about dating advice or anything like that. But I have thought, like, oh, I just think my kids are so awesome. And I would be devastated, right, being honest with you as a parent, if they chose somebody that was not a great person. But I've thought often, what would I do? What would I do? And so I guess right now all I'm doing is I'm planting a lot of seeds.
Yeah.
I am trying to just support, come alongside. I want them to know I am there for them no matter what, and here to listen.
But and hopefully what you do is cultivate where they're receptive to what you have to say. Mm-hmm. You know, at some point, my oldest is 21, about to get married in 6 months. And he doesn't have to take my advice. I mean, there's maybe a little bit left. You know, I'm still paying for a few things. But it won't be long, and any advice that he asks for, he doesn't have to take. Any advice that I offer, he doesn't have to take. And whether or not I should even offer it is something worth considering. So hopefully, I've cultivated a relationship with him, I think I have, that he cares about my advice, that cares what I have to say, like isn't just like, yeah, whatever, Dad. Mm-hmm. And so that if we think about what we're cultivating for when they're 25, how does that cause us to parent when they're 15? Because if we can ruin the 15 and we'll not get the 25. Mm-hmm. Because maybe it was what we cared about something so much that we drove them away. And not to say that it's not redeemable, but
everything's redeemable.
That's right.
So if you're listening and
Everything.
you feel like it's too late, I don't think it is.
There's always hope.
There's always hope. But it's really good reminders what we need to focus on.
Yeah. And you said something, Mindy, that I just want to highlight that I think is like, honestly, it's the key to parenting. One of the keys. There's lots, but honestly, I think parents put more pressure on their kids rather than creating or putting themselves to take pleasure in their kids. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't give them instruction. I'm not saying that we shouldn't train them and say what the boundaries are, what's off limits and what's not. And I learned this several years ago with one of my sons. I was putting more pressure on him and taking less pleasure in him, like delighting in him. The word is delight, in my opinion. Like, do your kids know that you delight in them? Or in my case, I had one particular son that and he was in that phase, drove me nuts. He was so irritating, and he's, of our 4 sons, kind of the provoker. I don't know if you've got one of those. Lots of parents.
I'm laughing and smiling right now because I understand.
Yeah, and they, provoking Jessie, provoking me, provoking their brothers. I mean, it was just pushing buttons, and I think that's a gift. It's just we don't know how to use it yet. Not to provoke, but to be.
Hey, it's a strong leader, actually.
Yeah, be attentive and know how people respond. But anyway, drove me insane, and I mean, just loads and loads and loads of opportunities for instruction. And it was, stop, don't treat your mom like that. Don't talk to your brother like that. Hey, pick up your stuff. Hey, do your homework. I mean, you name it, it was ongoing.
When you look at the ratio of how much, I try to think of that, like how my communication to my child is not all day long because I'm a working mom, right? So it's after school into the evenings and weekends, right? So it's like if I'm looking at my communication and if 80% of it is correcting,
right,
you kind of go, what do they feel like on the inside with me?
I would actually also say which comes first. So for me, one of the things that I changed, the first thing that when I see them at the first thing in the morning or when they come home from school, I want the first thing they experience from me is delight. It is so good to see you. Oh, I missed you today. Oh, how are you?
Be your dog.
Yeah, exactly.
Be your golden doodle.
That's exactly right. And it wasn't because there wasn't things to correct. And what had happened before was, as soon as he walked in the door after school, Jessie had maybe texted and shared what was happened on the drive and whatever, and dropped things in the wrong place and did this and my first response was, hey, don't do that. Let's fix that. Let's don't say that. Whatever. But instead, even though those are all things that were true and needed to be addressed, let's not make that the first thing. Let's make, how are you? It's so good to see you. Oh, welcome home. Give him a big hug. And what I found, to be quite honest, it took 1 month. I did it every time before he left for school or I got up or however the morning looked. And when he got home from school, my first response was delight. And in 1 month, our relationship was transformed. And the number of areas needed for instruction went significantly down. I think this is a little bit of a guess, the reality is that he wanted to please his dad because his dad was pleased in him.
It's that preemptive.
Yeah.
There was just first,
he felt like my dad loves me. I want to do what my dad wants. And he was 14, so it's like I expected him to be 14, but it wasn't just that he started to do the things that I asked him to do. It was also that the heart connection came back. Because there was distance. It was difficult. But delight is transformational.
And I'm just going to give people a one-liner that we heard a long time ago, and I don't even know who made this up, but just after anything you see your kid do, like you go watch them play a game, you go, whatever it might be that they're participating in, to start with and lead with, I enjoyed watching you play. Nothing about you did great, you didn't do great. It's all performance related. And while they're still under our roof, they're growing up and they need the delight. Yeah. It's essentially what you're saying. They need somebody to say, I enjoy. So I'm really trying that every day I am able to use that sentence somehow. And I say, the best part of my day was when I got to see you do this. I really enjoyed watching you use your gift on the field. Yeah. Or whatever it was. And I just really want them to know, out of all the things that happened today, that I really enjoyed that. Yeah. And their eyes, you should see their eyes just bug out. They're so, really? And I'm like, yeah, that was so cool. Yeah. And it brought me joy just to see you and your gift. Not you won, you lost, you missed it.
Yeah, I think oftentimes, and especially for a high achieving parent, you're a driver, you got to get things done. And maybe you have achieved things, so you've succeeded. So if you push hard, you get good grades. You're going to get into college. How some of the dominoes can set up. So you're trying to push your kids in a way that because you want more opportunities for them. But not all kids respond in the same way. But what ends up happening sometimes is we end up with if-then parents. If you do this, then I love you. Now that's not what you would say, nor would you ever think that.
But that's how they receive it.
Exactly, because they get the delight when they do something right. They get the delight when they get the A. They get the delight when they get the first chair.
When we want them to delight just for walking in the room.
Exactly. You actually might have just done something that was wrong, but I love you. I don't love what you just did, but you are a delight to me.
I just keep having this image of my golden doodle because I know you have a golden retriever, right? Yeah. And you can leave the room. You don't even leave for a minute. Come back in. It's as if you were gone for days. Totally. And they're like, I love you. You're back again. And I'm thinking, what a visual to imagine. What if our kids felt like that? The way our dogs make us feel. Yeah, which doesn't mean that as a parent, we just delight in our kids and we don't ever address anything that needs to be done. But I think the delight cultivates a soil
that those instructions are received in a better way.
And I think applied.
Yes.
Because it creates the nutrients necessary to believe it and grow.
Yeah. Yeah, to know that I don't need to do this in order to earn your love or to be delighted in, that's settled. My delight as a son of, one of my sons, one of your kids, that it is settled. And so if they can operate out of feeling like that's settled, then how they go about doing what they do, or how they look at failure, and are they afraid of you, or are they like, no, my mom, my dad delights in me. And so that's not in question.
So good. Well, I told you we would have no shortage of topics. We were like, what are we going to talk about? I was like, oh, don't worry about it. We're going to have so much to talk about. Before we go, can you please tell us what your favorite drink is, Aaron, that we're drinking today?
Oh, this is one of my favorite drinks. This is throat coat tea.
It's one of my favorites, too. So when you said that was yours, it was easy because I had it in my office.
Thank you so much. Yeah, you talk a lot and your voice gets tired. So.
And it has a really great flavor. Like, you don't have to add anything to it.
I'm not a big tea drinker, but it's really good.
It's so good.
Yeah.
It's so good. Well, you guys, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. We really bounced around to some really great wisdom from Aaron. So thank you for sharing your time with us. And if you guys like this episode, please drop some comments, subscribe. We would love for you to subscribe and share it with your friends, because there is so much knowledge and years of wisdom that Aaron shared with us today. So hopefully it can bless your family as well. All right, take care. We'll see you next time on the Something New Show. Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe to the show, rate, review, and share with a friend. Also, follow the Something New Show on Instagram and Facebook. If you want a fuller experience, watch the show on YouTube to help you create a life worth celebrating.